Hey, good morning, Trani and friends, and welcome to this week's episode of Patio Ponderings. This is episode 18 of this third season, and I'm so glad you decided to join me today. So what I've been thinking about this week, I'm going to be upfront and honest, is a very sticky subject. We've heard it said, I can't remember exactly how the phrase goes, but one of the things you never talk about in polite company or public company is religion or politics. Those are two subjects you stay away from traditionally. What I've been thinking about is both of those things, religion and politics. So here's how this has come up for me in the last week or so. On Sunday, we heard Jesus tell a parable called the Parable of the Wicked Tenants. It's found in the Gospel of Mark in the 12th chapter. And it's clear in that reading that it's told against a specific group of church leaders or religious leaders, let's call them that at the time, the chief priests, the legal experts, and the elders. And as I was reading through commentaries and listening, going through all my resources that I use when I'm preparing a sermon, it became pretty apparent that at least one of the issues that Jesus has with this group of people has to do with what we would label broadly as the politics of the time. And that's how these leaders were associated or related with the Roman government and the oppressive Roman rule that they lived under. Now, this group of leaders, some of their positions were either appointed by or at least sanctioned by the Roman government, the Roman leaders. At the very least, they were what I call middle managers. They had to navigate between the Jewish people that they were responsible for and the Roman rule. And what was happening more often than not is they were deferring to the Roman rule rather than God and what God desires for them and what God has entrusted them with in their roles. And as I continued to read and ponder, it became very clear, especially since this story takes place during what we now call Holy Week. It comes after the big Palm Sunday triumphant entry into Jerusalem, just a few days before Jesus is going to be crucified. It became apparent that the political scene of the day plays a really important part or has a very strong presence in the events of that week. I mean, eventually it's going to be this back and forth between these religious rulers and, people like Pontius Pilate, who are part of the Roman government, that's going to end up in the crucifixion of Jesus. So the story is tense and it's dripping with politics. And so it's hard not to think about the relationship of politics and our faith. So, as we think about this, we also are reminded every day on the news that we are in an election year and politics is a subject that's front and center. And as we see how politics have unfolded in our country, we also see how religious and church leaders are interacting with politicians, and it's happening in ways that are unhelpful and unfaithful. And so there's just a lot to think about with this. And I certainly can't cover everything there is to say about the relationship between religion and politics in one little podcast. So I just want to start by saying just a couple things today, or inviting you to think with me about just a couple things today. And I think perhaps throughout this year, I'm going to revisit this subject and talk about different aspects at different times. And so let's do that. So here's the couple things that I invite you to think about today. The first thing is that politics, the role of the Roman government and how those political relationships are with the Jewish people, mostly oppressive, but sometimes in certain ways allied with some of the leaders in unhelpful and unhealthy ways then. That is such a big part of the context of Jesus' story. Now, I know we don't like to mix politics in church with religion and that type of thing, but to take politics out of our faith, to take it out of our Bible study, is to eliminate a huge presence in the context of Jesus' life and ministry. So I'm not sure that we can really do that. So what do we do? How do we kind of navigate the politics of Jesus' day in how we think about our faith today? That's just one big question in and of itself. But I invite you to just think about that a little bit. The second thing that I just want to mention is when I'm talking about politics, especially as it relates to religion, I consider that to be a very different subject than partisanship. That's a whole nother conversation, and that definitely gets into some really unfaithful areas when we try to mix partisanship with faith, particularly as it relates to who Jesus is, because there is no political party or political ideology, despite their claims, that can hold Jesus within them. It's just, that's not possible. So those two things are separate, and I try very hard to stay away from the partisanship piece of this and simply talk about the greater political themes. That's what I'm thinking of. So those two things are kind of what I have in my mind this week with this story, and what I have in my mind particularly as we go through this election year, in how contentious and divisive politics have become in our country, and just invite you to think along with me on these topics as we go through the year. And we'll come back to it from time to time. As always, I'd love to hear what you have to say. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you on Sunday. Bye.